January 28th delivers an action-packed spotlight cache featuring Ares, Misery, and Miss Marvel. Is Ares the powerhouse your deck needs? I'll show theory-crafted decks for each series, revisit Bullseye from the last cache, and analyze whether this lineup is worth your resources. Let's see if Ares is an actual god. We start off with the Bullseye review. I may have been a tiny bit wrong on him. Bullseye stinks. Fight me in the comments. Bullseye stinks.
Bullseye stinks.
Okay, so I was completely wrong on Bullseye. He turned out to be a very strong card in the right decks. The Dakin deck surprised me. I didn't think that would be as good as it appears to be. And the other decks haven't particularly panned out. I have seen him paired with some Gambit, but not as much as I feared, thankfully. I can't stand Gambit. He, of course, is a discard card. The thing with Bullseye as well is Luke Cage doesn't exactly counteract what Bullseye is doing, because in the decks that he is best in with Collector and Morbius, you are building up your Collector and Morbius, and if the opponent has Luke Cage, sure, you aren't negatively afflicting their cards, but you're building up your Collector and Morbius is so large that you may not even care. So Bullseye is definitely a good card in those types of decks. You need to want to play discard, because I haven't seen anything worth talking about as far as negatively afflicting those types of decks go. So if you are a fan of discard, different types of discard, because he is best in a different type of discard deck, you have your Hella decks, you have your standard discard decks, and now you have your Bullseye discard decks. So if you are a fan of discard, he's probably worth picking up. The rest of the Spotlight Cache week, though, is not great, even though I will be having a Misery deck video coming out just in case you accidentally get her. The rest of the Spotlight Cache is not great. This card, if you're a big discard player and you're going to get your use out of Bullseye, I'd say tokens aren't a bad way to go. So my overall verdict is Bullseye is a very strong card in the right types of decks. Onto the complete Spotlight lineup, we have Ares, who I expect to be a decent to good card. There's Misery, who sees not much play, some fringe play, some very off-meta play. And then we have Miss Marvel, who has completely fallen off the radar and is barely used in any decks. But that doesn't necessarily mean these cards are good or bad based on that. So I will dive into those in their specific sections. So my thoughts on Ares is he should be a decently good card, where in the decks that you play him in, aside from the first week, a lot of people are going to be playing big power decks, so you may or may not connect with Ares. But once that goes away, you should connect more often than you don't. And at 4/6, you really do need him to connect. So the specific decks you play him in will have a lot of big power cards. He will connect more than he doesn't. But otherwise, this is just a very straightforward card. There's not much nuance here. If you have a bunch of power in your deck, then he's going to connect. The one other part of Ares is the information part, where your power total of your 3 cards and your opponent's power total of their 3 cards are revealed, that total number, not the individual cards. So there's some information there, but to me, that doesn't mean much in this case, because if you're playing, let's say, a move bounce deck, you don't care that they only had 4 points of power or 5 points of power or 10 on their top 3 cards, because all of their cards are low power. Same thing if you're facing an Agent Venom type deck. All of those cards potentially are just 3 power. So yes, the Ares will connect, but you may not be able to overcome an Iron Man and Mystique combo that your opponent has. So I'm not a huge believer in this information that can be gathered there. It may mislead you. So you really just have to evaluate your opponent's deck. In some cases it can. If you are playing a mirror match, then of course it is immensely helpful to know that they won't be drawing anything good. But again, they could just have those cards in their hand already. So it is really tough for me to value that level of information on this card. So otherwise, it's just a big power card, potentially, at 4 cost. We kick off the decks, of course, with Series 2. We have paired Ares with Gamora, Vision, Hulk, and the Infinite. Those are the big power cards. We also have some cheaper cards that allow you to get more power. So there's Lizard in there if he's still in your deck. 5 power for 2 cost is decent. If you play him out early, he's also good value typically. Okoye, which buffs cards in your deck, further increasing the likelihood that Ares on reveal will connect. There is Medusa, who is good played early. Nightcrawler to shift around some power. Then we have some tech cards in Cosmo, Shang-Chi, and Enchantress. So Series 2 doesn't have a lot of options. So that's why the high end is just Hulk and Infinite. But otherwise, I think this should be a decent Series 2 deck for Ares. Shuri Sauron is a deck that has fallen completely off the map. I think it's still a decent deck. So for this version, that is what we're going with Ares. We're just throwing them into this deck. We have a decent amount of high-powered cards, even if some of them are cheaper. We can always go the plain old Shuri Sauron route. We can throw Ares into the mix. We have 2 tech cards in Shang-Chi and Enchantress. Enchantress doubles in getting rid of Lizard, Typhoid Mary, and Red Skull's abilities, just in case you don't draw into the Sauron. So this is the pure Series 3 version. Now for the main version, I tried my hardest not to make a Surtur deck, but it just makes too much sense in Surtur. So we are going with kind of a hybrid plan, which is with War Machine, Infinite, and Ebony Maw. You have a lot of power in this deck. Scar can get discounted to either 2 or 0. If he is 2, you can pair him on the last turn with Shang-Chi. We have Gladiator, which during Ares' first week, we're going to have a lot of big power decks. So Gladiator might pull out that big power card. Shang-Chi can clean that up. Zabu discounts the 5 4-cost cards we have in this deck. Psylocke allows you to get 1 down early. Most people are familiar with Surtur decks already from when he was the Season Pass card and really took over the meta for maybe a week or 2. So that is the mode we are going with this deck. Again, splitting with War Machine. Misery sees mostly exclusive play in mill-type decks. I'm pretty sure I featured her in some kind of off-meta deck. I forget which one specifically, or maybe that's what I'm cooking up right now. So she just is not that great of a card, quite frankly. She destroys the on-reveal cards. You can play her in some kind of Thor Hammers deck, but even people have attempted that. That didn't even really take off because you can trigger the Hammers twice on the last turn instead of using Odin, which is more expensive. So otherwise, there's just not much with Misery. Miss Marvel is seeing even less play. When she was the Season Pass card, she was a meta terror. They had to nerf her, and they did quite successfully. But now her ability is just super tricky or to navigate in order to have it connect, especially when you throw in junk type decks that completely just nullify what Miss Marvel is trying to do, or what you're trying to do with Miss Marvel. So it's just gets to be very tricky to get her bonus to actually stick and land. She's probably in line for some kind of buff because the player base just recognizes there are so many more powerful cards than her at the moment. I still kind of like her. I want to see if I can get her to work in her current state. But aside from that, you're not really going to play her much unless she gets buffed. So will Nerd Dynamite be unlocking Ares? That is a no. I will not be unlocking Ares. I will pass.
You'll suffer for your insolence!
These big power cards just do not interest me. They're very straightforward. If you like those types of decks, that's fantastic. There's a place for them, and more power to you. Me personally, I just don't like those types of straightforward decks. So that is why he's a pass. It's just pure power. And that's just not something that interests me. I passed on Surtur when Surtur was the season pass. So I am definitely going to be passing on Ares. Before we get to the recap, thanks to everybody that's watched this deep into the video. It helps the channel grow. And thanks to the members as well. So Ares is a good card, I think I'm going to say. I do not ride the fence here. They are either bad or good. So I think I will say Ares is good. If he turns out to be bad, it's pretty easy to buff him, just like they did with the Guardians of the Galaxy. You just buff the bonus. Misery is a bad card, and Miss Marvel is also a bad card. No cutoffs this week, folks. So really, you would just be using your keys for Ares only, and I do not think Ares is good enough to overcome Misery and Miss Marvel unless they get last second buffs in between when I recorded this video and when the spotlight releases. And they won't, because I'm recording this in the middle of after an OTA and before the next one. So I can't recommend you use your keys and tokens on Ares. Yeah, so that's up to you, but I wouldn't do it. Thanks for watching this preview. Until next time.